Hi guys, this video is on amphibian physiology, and by the end of it you should be able to explain the general structures and functions of the integumentary, skeletal, cardiovascular, respiratory, digestive, and nervous systems in amphibians. So the integument of amphibians is skin, and it's permeable to both gas and water, and so that allows them to bring in gas and water, but it also makes them susceptible to water loss. And so amphibians can absorb moisture from their surroundings through their skin, and anurans, so that's, remember, the frogs and toads have this pelvic patch for absorption of moisture, and it's in their pelvis, and it accounts for just 10% of the surface area of their body, but it accounts for 70% of their moisture absorption. The skin of amphibians is composed of an epidermis and a dermis. The epidermis doesn't have blood vessels or nerves, so the dermis provides nutrition to the epidermis. The epidermis has glands, both mucus glands and granular glands. The granular glands are the poison glands. So we looked at this on another video earlier, right? The poison glands, and there's mucus glands. Mucus keeps the skin moist. Poison glands secrete poison or toxins. And the outermost layer of the epidermis will molt, and it depends on the species and on temperature and different environmental factors how often they molt. Some amphibians have aposematic coloration. You may have learned about that in other classes before. It's when they're really brightly colored to warn predators that they have toxins. And so that really bright coloring, like the dart frog, is aposematic. Webbed feet are present in some amphibians. Most often you see them in aquatic amphibians or aquatic stages of amphibians. Tree frogs have adhesive toe pads with glandular discs at the tip. So these three pictures are electron scanning microscope pictures that this is zoomed in on the pad. This is zoomed in even more, and you see the little parts of the pad, and then you zoom in even more and see the cells there. You see that they're kind of hexagonal, and this here is a mucus channel that's within that toe pad, and so it secretes mucus onto the toe pad, and that creates surface tension and makes those pads really sticky. Many amphibians also have chromatophores. Those are pigmented cells in the epidermis or the dermis, so that's where you get the color from. And there's even some salamanders that can change color by either movement of those chromatophores or just changing those chromatophores. The skeletal system is different from fish in a couple different ways. It's more ossified, meaning more bones are fused, so it's stronger in a way, and that's to deal with the increased pull of gravity on land as opposed to water. There's some appendages that are modified for movement on land. So, fish have fins to swim, but on land, swimming doesn't work. So they've got their limbs, like arms and legs, or hind legs and forelegs. The columella is a bone in the middle ear that transmits sound waves, so some of the skeleton is adapted for other functions besides just structure and movement. So this shows right here in the columella, and that's so it's a part of the skeleton modified for hearing. These were the first vertebrates with the sternum, but not all amphibians have the sternums. It's lacking in the caecilians and some salamanders. And then the anurans, so the frogs and toads, have fused radius and ulna. And so the radius and ulna are the two bones in the forearm, and they're fused to give kind of more support, because those forearms are used basically just to kind of hold up the frog, whereas the back legs are to really jump with. So the cardiovascular system, larval salamanders and tadpoles have gills, whereas others will have lungs, and lungs were a big kind of evolutionary development in amphibians. They allowed for the diffusion of oxygen on land, so they allowed species to move to land. Remember that amphibians have a 3-chambered heart. We've talked about that before. What that means is that, remember, the top chambers of the heart are atria, bottom chambers are ventricles. In amphibians, there's a septum between the two atria, and so it separates oxygenated blood from deoxygenated blood, keeps them separate, and that allows for more efficient circulation. Remember, there's double circulation in amphibians and all the higher vertebrates, where blood goes out to the lungs, picks up oxygen, comes back to the heart, and gets then pumped out to the rest of the body to kind of deliver that oxygen. The ventricle, though, since it's only 3 chambers, the ventricle does kind of mix the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood, but in amphibians, most amphibians, they have these things called ventricular trabeculæ, and they're ridges that do kind of separate that ventricle so that it keeps the oxygenated blood somewhat separate from the deoxygenated. So respiration, there's a lot of variation in amphibians here, but in general, air comes in the nares, that's like the nostrils. The glottis is like a circular patch toward the back of the mouth. The air travels through to get to the trachea and then goes to the lungs. The anterior end of the trachea has a voice box, and eardrums are actually like amplifiers for that. So some amphibians, not all, can make a call, or they have like this voice, and the eardrums are actually like loudspeakers for that voice. So that's kind of just a adaptation of part of the respiratory system in some amphibians. There's a number of different methods of gas exchange in amphibians. Cutaneous is the breathing through the skin, and some salamanders will depend entirely on that. There's a lot of species that use a combination of cutaneous and breathing through their lungs or pulmonary. There's some species that use gills. Many species use gills for part of their life, for the aquatic stage of their life. They'll use gills, and this shows the external gills on a salamander. Then many amphibians use a combination of these two at the end, where they're breathing through their lungs, but they need this bugopharyngeal inhalation and exhalation to get the air to their lungs. So we have a diaphragm, which is a muscle that when it contracts, air gets pulled into our lungs, but amphibians don't have that. And so what they do, it's shown in this diagram over here, this buccal cavity will pull air into it, and then they pulse their throat to force the air into their lungs. And anurans, so the frogs and toads, they have more developed lungs, so there's really a spectrum of lungs and of the different kinds of respiration. But anurans have pretty developed lungs that have alveoli. Alveoli are little sacs. They almost altogether look like bunches of grapes, and what they do is increase the surface area for diffusion of oxygen. Digestive system. So the tongues of amphibians are pretty important in most of them for capturing prey. And what's kind of neat is some of them have their tongue attached at the front end, and some of them have it attached at the back end. So like our tongue is attached in back of our mouth, right? But a lot of frogs and other amphibians have them attached at the front so that they can kind of fling it out. Their tongue has a mucus coating that allows them to kind of stick it to the prey, and then when they pull their tongue back in, they're pulling it back into the back of their mouth so that there's less a chance that it can kind of jump out or fly out or wiggle out, because they don't really have teeth to chew. They have small teeth, but like in frogs, they have these maxillary teeth along the edge, and then these vomeron teeth right on the roof of their mouth, and those are more for holding the prey and keeping it in their mouth. They don't grind up the food with their teeth. When food comes in, it comes in the mouth travels down the esophagus, into the stomach, then into the small intestines, which are usually really coiled up, then to the large intestines, and out the cloaca. And the cloaca is shared digestive, urinary, and reproductive system. The nervous system. So some amphibians, especially aquatic stages of salamanders, have a lateral line present. So just like the fish have the lateral line as a sensory organ, some salamanders still have that. Ears are far more developed in amphibians than they are in fish. They have an outer, middle, and inner ear. Most species have all three parts. And the ears help with both hearing and equilibrium, so maintaining an equilibrium. And anurans especially have a well-developed tympanic membrane, so that's analogous to our eardrum, and you can see it here, you can see it behind his hand there. As far as the eyes, most amphibians have pretty large and well-developed eyes, so you can see their big eyes here. And some amphibians, like frogs, have this cool nictitating membrane. It's this clear eyelid that comes up from the bottom, and they have muscles that'll actually push it up over their eye, and it's clear so that it protects their eye, but they can also see through it. The pineal and parietal organs are the pineal is present in all amphibians. The parietal is only in the anurans, and it functions as photoreceptor for thermal regulation and for orientation. This week's Wildlife Club meeting, there was a biologist there from the Wildlife Resources Commission, and he talked about a frog study that they did where they tracked a frog, and he migrated to his breeding grounds 5 miles away. Then he found his way back to his original spot, and the next year went to the exact same breeding spot. And so that's some pretty crazy orientation for a tiny animal that's just hopping along the ground. And that pineal and parietal organs are what kind of help with that orientation to those places. Amphibians' nose is really they have external nares, which are like nostrils on the outside, and that's where air comes in for the inhalation. And then there's internal nares for exhalation, and the exhalation happens into the oral cavity. And they use their nose or nares for both recognition of food and recognition of pheromones. So especially the caecilians and the salamanders use pheromones as a major form of communication. So it's time to kind of go back and make sure that you have good notes on each one of these systems, both the structures and the functions. And I'll leave you with some trivia. How many species of anurans, so those are the frogs and toads, are present in North Carolina? Think about it. Come up with your guess. Ready? 30. All right. Have a great night. See you in class.